Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Lioncast Wrestling Crew. Today we have, as always, my partner in crime, JP.
Hey, what's up, guys?
And joining us for the first time on this Lioncast Wrestling Crew, but he is a permanent member of the Lioncast Wrestling Crew, Troy.
Hey everyone, it's good to be on here. I'm excited for this evening. I can't wait.
Alright, as always, we have to get to our very first segment.
Time for news. Time for news.
Alright, guys, it's been a very loaded month as far as wrestling news. There's a lot going on for the month of May. First thing I'll get to is, of course, we start off with the deaths. Unfortunately, Jerome New Jack Young died at the age of 58 on May 14th. He's multi-time ECW Tag Team Champion, one of the innovators of hardcore wrestling. Might not have been the greatest person in the world, but I mean, he definitely made a name for himself with hardcore ECW fans. And so my prayers go out to his widow. But yes, anybody got anything to add as far as the death of New Jack?
Probably one of, if not the most controversial guys in wrestling. But regardless of whatever opinions people had of him, as opposed to, like, say, someone like the Ultimate Warrior, as a whole, I have more respect for New Jack for what he did in the ring, what he contributed to the grander scheme of what hardcore wrestling is, you know, be it intentional or otherwise. I think that he reminds me of an older cloth of the hardcore wrestlers back in the 70s who, for better or for worse, the one thing I will never say about New Jack, he was not fake. He was a very real individual. And the character and pretty much him were exactly the same. I mean, unfortunately, you know, he kind of burned a lot of bridges near the end, but I feel that I owe him much more respect than a lot of people give him credit for.
I just rewatched The Life and Crimes of New Jack the other day on Dark Side of the Ring after he passed away, and it makes you think. Not everybody agreed with what he did, but he lived the gimmick to its fullest. From the time he started till the time he was done, he got under people's skin, irritated people. He was a performer and entertainer. I mean, start to finish. There's no doubt in saying that. And people will say negative things about him, but he gave a lot to his business, and people are never going to forget him at all.
It's tag team the Gangsters. Or the Gangstas, I should pronounce it correctly, were one of the more popular teams in the mid-90s wrestling as far as Smoky Mountain Wrestling and ECW. And also he had a pretty good team with John Cronus, formerly of the Eliminators. So I'll give him his due. He was a great tag team wrestler outside of the hardcore ranks, but I mean, he was definitely an innovator. He was definitely one of the more popular names in the Northeast circuit. He was authentic to the bone, and we have to give him that. He did not lighten down his gimmick for anybody, and he made no apologies, even if that was to his detriment. Another huge release month for the WWE. WWE has been cutting costs, so this month was no different. So the following have been released on May 19th. Jessamine Duke, Alexander Wolf, Vanessa Bourne, The Velveteen Dream, Drake Wirtz, or as many CZW fans may know him as Drake Younger. Also, Great Khali trainee Kavita Devi, who had one match under her belt wrestling in the Women's Battle Royal at WrestleMania. Ezra Judge, and also Skylar Story, who many may know as Brandy Loren, and she is the real-life girlfriend of Joey Janela. And then a week later, WWE has announced the release of Tom Phillips and Raw broadcast team member Adnan Burke. And they also, later on in the day, announced his replacement for Burke, which is Bellator's Jimmy Smith.
Specifically, I got pissed off at Alexander Wolf, but that's more to do with, I think Imperium was probably one of the best factions they've ever had. Obviously, they're going to replace him, but they asserted this dominance that only really worked when there was all four of them. And it kind of feels like bittersweet, but I'm also like, I understand why. Velveteen Dream was a long time coming. I'm honestly shocked that they got rid of Samoa Joe and all the other people from the last cut before Velveteen Dream. Considering that, like, Samoa Joe, for instance, he literally did commentary for WrestleMania and then they fired him the next day. Whereas Velveteen Dream has literally not had a match in a year. and yet they've kept him on the payroll. He's a whole other can of worms I won't even get into, because I can't stand that guy. The one that really hit me, like kind of really upset me, was honestly Jessamine Duke, because I think that she has so much talent, and she has a lot of just this raw power behind her fights, because I've seen her in mixed martial arts. Obviously she's one of the 4 horsewomen of MMA, but it's more to do with her personality is really cool. Like, I watch her streams, she's really funny. It just kind of pains me that she's pretty much been nothing more than maybe a chauffeur to Shayna for a little bit and then never again, so it was kind of stupid. Tom Phillips was actually also a big shock, because to me, honestly, I could have seen Tom Phillips be the guy who would be the next Michael Cole. Not so much in the irritating department, more to do with him being kind of like the new voice of the newer generation. Instead, and this is what's astounding to me. How the hell are they like, you know what? We need to get rid of Samoa Joe on commentary. We got to get rid of that new guy they hired. I forgot his name. And we got to get rid of Tom Phillips. But you know who the people really want to hear? Byron Saxton. Who the hell wants to hear Byron Saxton on commentary?
The question is, who the hell remembers the last time they heard Byron Saxton on commentary?
Exactly, and yet he's still on the payroll. And I'm like, why? It's astounding. Anyway, that's my whole 2 cents on everything.
Well, Alexander Wolf pissed me off because he's amazing. I've been watching WWE Network, Peacock, whatever the hell you want to call it, because the internet provider that I have gives it for free to anybody who gets some streaming service. So when I get bored, I watch old matches. But I was actually watching the Best of Adam Cole, and they had the first War Games match on with Sanity, the Authors of Pain, Roderick Strong, and, of course, Undisputed Era, Adam Cole, Bobby Fish, Kyle O'Reilly. And I just remember that bump where Wolf pretty much busted his head wide open. The superplex, I believe it was. I think it would be technically a German superplex or belly to back superplex. I mean, that was like, I was like, this guy's the real deal. Sanity made him like a superstar. They unfortunately ruined Sanity, like, the main roster does with just about every stable, unless you're the New Day or the Shield. But yeah, that one was the one that upset me the most, because he's talented, he's good character. He's not like a mat technician or a high flyer, but he's good at what he does. Jessamine Duke, they never really did anything with her, which is disappointing, because I feel like with the right training and the right build, she could have been a beast. I mean, 90% of the wrestlers that we see that have an MMA background flourish. I mean, Shayna Baszler, Matt Riddle, Ronda Rousey. Before Cain Velasquez went to WWE, Cain Velasquez, Tom Lawler in New Japan. I mean, a lot. Well, you wouldn't really say Brock Lesnar, but kind of. But it's more the people who start in MMA and then transition to pro wrestling, because I feel like easier time than some people to transition. That was surprising to me, but they don't. I mean, Shayna's stuck with Nia Jax basically, or has been. Marina Shafir is Roderick Strong's wife. Basically, she's not her own person anymore. She's relegated to that role. Ruined and wasted the 4 horsewomen of MMA, which is unfortunate. The one that I mean, a lot of people aren't really talking about is Vanessa Bourne. Used much more than an enhancement talent, I guess you would say, but she played a heel character very well, and I mean, with the right training, she could have been very good. And like Jack said, the Velveteen Dream has been a long, long time coming, and I mean, I could see the other members of the roster not wanting to work with him over all the allegations that he's had. I wouldn't want to work with someone like that. So, I mean, he hasn't really said much in the past year, except recently, to deny the allegations. So, might be kind of thinking they're a little bit on the true side. I don't know. I don't know the whole story, and I'm not in Velveteen Dream Circle, but I mean, that was a long time coming for me, and that's the one I'm the very least surprised about.
I will say the one that really bothers me the most, just like you guys, is Alexander Wolf. I just think in terms of the Imperium, I thought, in Walter's absentia, that he is the next man up as far as leader of the Imperium. Just the way he has a commanding presence with just his eyes alone. He just carries that air of intensity with him. So the head scratcher when they had them turn on him like that, because really I thought Imperium is best as a 4-man unit, especially with Walter not traveling. You kind of needed a 3-man unit in NXT to really push Eichner and Bartel. So that was unfortunate, but I will say Wolf is probably going to land somewhere big. I would imagine Japan. He really could rock the house with New Japan Strong. Vanessa Bourne, I really think that she could have been a bigger star than she was. I mean, she could talk. She had a great and unique look to her. And they flirted with putting her on the main roster, because during the whole, they flirted with putting her on the main roster. They even called her up and did nothing with her. And, so, I mean, she was working on her character, and she was working on her ring gear and everything. So she was slowly improving. They just do what they do with everybody else. They just cut the legs out from underneath them whenever they do grow those legs. Yeah, Jessamine Duke as well. I just think she, not only does she have that raw talent, but she had that personality to her too, that she really could have been something if they just chose to do something with her. She's quick. She was a very quick student as far as learning the craft, but she never got a chance to showcase it. That's unfortunate. Dream, I'm sorry guys, excuse my language, but him. All right, moving on. Drake Wirtz, also him. Brandy Lauren, renamed Skylar Story. I really think she showed a lot of what she had in Evolve, and it's really a shame that she didn't get an opportunity to show that on NXT, because she really could have been a breakout star in the women's ranks as a heel. So I think she's definitely going to land somewhere because of Joey Janela. Tom Phillips is the one that really bothers me, because he was probably one of the few announcers that they brought in a few years back that actually did a decent job, that could have really carried the banner on from Michael Cole. I mean, say what you want about Michael Cole, but Michael Cole, he's not the best, but he's not the worst either. But Tom Phillips, I think, was showing it was starting to surpass Cole. Maybe that's why they're getting rid of him. Hope they don't do the same with Vic Joseph, because I think Vic Joseph is doing fine work right now. Adnan Burke, I mean, it'd be better if it was baseball. It's not baseball, it's wrestling. He gave it his best effort for 7 weeks, but even he realized, hey, he was in over his depth. We'll move on to our next bit of news here. Will Ospreay has unfortunately suffered a neck injury at New Japan Pro Wrestling's Wrestling Dontaku during his win over Shingo Takagi. Very unfortunate, because he was literally just crowned in his first run with the IWGP title. And also, they had the redesign of the IWGP title, so he's the first one to hold that. So he was tasked with having to elevate that and establish that. And the Empire is really starting to pick up steam. This injury sets all of that back, and I wonder how bad that's going to set him back. Probably the worst timing, because New Japan's really trying to rebound from the pandemic as well. And Will Ospreay was pretty much the next big Gaijin superstar for them. And I mean, if this neck injury is as bad as he is, I shudder to think how long he's going to be out. But I hope he comes back, and I hope he regains as soon as possible, because he's definitely the man for the job right now. Guys, I know this is really eating at you both here, so I know you have some stuff to say on this.
Well, you both know, as you know me, that I am a massive mark for Will Ospreay. When he won and was crowned the IWGP World Heavyweight Champion, I think it was one of the most exciting moments in my wrestling life, I guess you would say, because I've been pushing for this guy for years. I mean, I've seen his work in Japan, in the UK, seen him in Ring of Honor before, actually live with JP. He was one of the best junior heavyweights. His battles with Ricochet were phenomenal. I mean, him and Sabre their chemistry was amazing. They'd have amazing matches too. He's been one of my favorite wrestlers for the past couple years, because it's very rare, in my opinion, to see him have a bad match with anybody. I mean, this was one of the best moments where someone literally, crawled from the bottom, crawled from, I wouldn't say the junior division in New Japan's the bottom, but crawled from the junior division and is crowned the top champion, especially in a Japanese company when you're a non-Japanese wrestler. It's been happening a lot more recently, like Jay White, Kenny Omega, AJ Styles, people like that. The Gaijin's getting the top title, but he's literally top 5 for me right now, if not all time. And as soon as I heard the news of the injury, I think I woke up in the middle of the night to feed my baby, and I kind of scour the news sites every once in a while when I wake up in the middle of the night. And I couldn't believe it. So I looked at multiple sources, and I was like, you have got to be kidding me. This is literally the worst time this could have happened. And it's disappointing. I mean, it's disappointing as a New Japan fan. It's disappointing as an Ospreay fan. It's disappointing as a wrestling fan in general. I mean, it sucks because he's so talented. He's so young still. He just, like JP also said, the Empire was getting traction. They could have been positioned as one of the top factions in the company, and it's going to be all for now, which is unfortunate. It's disappointing, and it's been eating me up. I mean, it sucks. It really sucks. I thought I was dreaming, and then I woke up and kept looking. I was like, no, this can't be real. So yeah, this hurts. This hurts me a lot.
Well, there's a lot more too right now that they're still trying to get into. Detail-wise, they haven't really released much, but one of the few things that they found was basically what had happened was, because they were leading into that match at Tokyo Dome. So he was supposed to fight Okada at Tokyo Dome. This was before the emergency was called. He went into the doctor for a checkup because he had just had that match with Shingo and he's starting to get some tingles on his neck. Apparently they said, we're going to give you, because they did an MRI and an x-ray of his neck, and they said, you're going to need to have emergency surgery, but we're going to hold off on it because we're going to wait. We have to examine the rest of your body to see if it has moved down to your lower spine. Because apparently what it was his discs are not compressed, they're starting to separate. And I think a lot of that comes back from way back in 2018, and I've talked about this before, when he did the Spanish Fly move to Marty Scurll at Sakura Genesis 2018, and he did it on the ring apron, and he kind of like messed his neck up. I think it's majority from that, and just he did what I called pulling a Tanahashi. For those of you who don't know, Hiroshi Tanahashi had a match years ago where he actually severed the muscle in his right arm was essentially hanging on by a thread. So the muscle was actually split down the middle. And they told him, you're going to need to have emergency surgery, but you're going to be out for 8 to 9 months. And at the time, he was the champion. He said, no, I refuse, so just make special ring gear to keep my arm compressed down. So that's why the majority of his run, when he was the champion, he had that long sling down his arm. That's why. And also, if you're ever wondering why Finn Balor does the same thing, that's why. That's basically what he did. He pulled I'll take care of it later. But the difference is Tanahashi, during the pandemic, since he had time off, they weren't doing any shows, he did get the surgery. The difference is this was a neck injury, and as wrestling fans, we all know the truth, and that is neck injuries are injuries that you never 100% fully recover from. You can look at some of the best wrestlers in the world that have had neck surgeries, like Kurt Angle back in the day. They're very rare that you actually get them, but when you do, you don't wrestle the way you did. You're not back to your peak. It doesn't happen. It's horrible timing, and it's horrible for wrestling fans, especially for the fact that not only does the Tokyo Dome show get canceled, but they have to strip the champion. And it's the guy who everyone wanted to be the champion, and the only upside I will say about this is that at least they caught something early. Dare I say it, we could have had a draws situation. We could have had a worse situation than that. And I'm glad that they caught it. And on the plus side, when Will Ospreay recovers, because let's be honest, he's not going to not recover because he's Will Ospreay. He's going to keep fighting and fighting. He's going to do everything he can to get back into that ring. When he comes back, he will still be the undefeated champion. So, in the same way I could see it with Karrion Kross, how he was an undefeated champion, it's the same boat. And as soon as he comes back, it's, full steam ahead. Just pick up where he left off, because look what happened with the Time Bomb. I mean, no one thought he would come back, but boom, he came back, and he's better than ever.
Absolutely. AEW Spanish announce team member Willie Urbina released for making racially insensitive comments about Hikaru Shida. This really eats at me because literally they have Hikaru Shida in advertisements on TNT for the campaign against hate against Asians. So I fully agree with them giving him the boot. I just thought, it's a bonehead thing to do, especially, with her being one of the top stars, to make fun of the way she speaks in a time that people are being attacked for the way they speak. AEW's not been making great decisions, but they made a great decision on this one. Guys, I know I know Jack, he's got something to say on this.
Yeah, it's a smart decision. I mean, I do find it hilarious that AEW seems to have a habit of saying one thing and doing another, but that's more of a karma thing than anything else. But like I said, I'm just I hate being that guy and saying this, but it's the year 2021 right now. Can we all just stop acting like we're in the 30s and we're seeing another non-white person for the first time in the history of forever? It's hilarious how people are about, like, not over the top, but how stupid people can be about the dumbest shit. I made this before when I said to someone, what's the difference between stabbing a person of one color or a person of another? Nothing, because they're both stabbed. It's the same principle. What's the point? Why even get upset about it? Now, if it's something like they insulted you, yeah, I can understand that. So I 100% agree with them firing him because he's a dumbass. Like, like, if you work any job and you go, haha, insert racist statement here, and you don't get to be shocked that, oh man, I got fired? Well, no, you got fired. Come on.
I'm just gonna kind of go off what Jack said. I mean, it's 2021. This entire world has had the shittiest possible year I think we could have ever had, and people are still doing this kind of garbage. It's nonsense. I mean, plus you're a commentator, you have a hot mic. I mean, don't say it in the first place, and you wouldn't have to worry about yourself being muted. It's ridiculous. I mean, I'm not going to judge people because I'm not, the perfect person in the entire world, but you're on, I'm guessing it's live commentary whenever it's broadcasted in Hispanic-speaking countries. So why even do it? Like, if you want to be a racist, be it somewhere else. Do it with your friends. Who gives? I don't care. But like, if you have to, if you can't fight the urge to be a piece of garbage, but especially with all the hate that Asian people are getting in the United States within the past year, because everybody's blaming Asian people for giving everybody the coronavirus and blah blah blah. I mean, the Asian community has gotten a lot of hate. All minority communities have gotten a lot of hate, especially within the past year. A lot longer than that, but it's just getting worse and worse. But I mean, like I said, we've had the crappiest past year plus with all the coronavirus stuff. Just get along. Just stop being an a-hole. I mean, it's there's no need for this anymore. It's 2021. This isn't the 1950s. It's tired at this point. I'm exhausted with people doing this kind of stuff. It's just, I'm over it. I can't do it anymore.
I think it's also just an overwhelming amount of stupidity, because one of the people that got fired from the list, I believe it was this past month, I don't know his name. I call him Leather Ref because he overtans the shit out of himself. Literally before he got fired. This is the actual reason he got fired, because he was backstage. And mind you, he lives in a small little district in Florida. He was backstage, had his full NXT referee outfit on, with the NXT logo behind him, backstage, and he called into one of those public speaking things for the counties. You know how you could call in Skype or whatever, or Zoom. So he calls in, it was about a mask mandate. They wanted to restrict harder mask mandates in this small little county in Florida because of the fact that, there was a higher spread of COVID. Okay. This guy who got fired, this ref, old Leatherface, he says, I'm not joking, he equated that if more people will wear masks, they're more likely to kill and kidnap kids. And I'm just like, and it's a real thing he said. He actually said, wearing a mask, you're more likely to want to kill and kidnap kids. And he's like, you're going to create murderers in our society. And I'm like, yes, because as we all know, there has never been a murder that hasn't taken place without a mask. This is just facts, people.
He's reportedly part of that whole QAnon bullshit too, so that tells you everything you need to know.
He is, and but it goes back to that same thing I was thinking about with this guy. The amount of stupidity, but it's more than that. Why do so many companies hire stupid ass people? Like, it really astounds me. And then on top of that, with this specific Spanish announcing guy, think about the fact that right now, there are so few people that could have worked, especially Spanish-speaking people, because of all of the thing that's going on with the coronavirus. And Mexico has had a massive lockdown. Lucha Libre has pretty much come to a standstill as of recently. They just recently started doing shows again, and it's in limited capacity. And this guy is going around saying, I'm bulletproof. It's like the old saying I always say to people, everyone is bulletproof until they get shot.
Yep.
That's true. I mean, 100% true.
Well, we got one more piece of news here, and this is relatively good news as somebody who likes to go to shows. Troy and I like to frequent a lot of wrestling shows, but both the WWE and AEW have announced that they are both resuming touring effective this summer. And I feel this is good news. I still feel that we still have a pandemic going on, so we still need to be safe. But this is definitely encouraging news, and also I'm sure the talent are looking forward to this as well, so they can have that live crowd feel again. Definitely positive news, but it just needs to be done safely. And if they're going full capacity, I don't know how that could possibly be done. Guys, what do you have to add to that?
You know, just stay safe, and hopefully we can all enjoy ourselves without having to worry about idiots. That's all it really comes down to.
I don't know how I feel about it yet. I mean, we'll see, because it's not me that I'm worried about. It's the other morons. You know, people who are above getting vaccinated, and people who are above the masks, wearing masks if they're mandated because of one reason or another. If it's a safe capacity, I'm cool with it. I'll go. I don't think I'm gonna take my baby to a show anytime soon, but I mean, he's still one. I'm gonna take him to one in a couple years, hopefully. But I see the good and the bad in it, but I try to see the good and the bad in everything as much as possible. Next time there's a Ring of Honor show, if I'm able to go near us, I am going. I miss it a lot. I will say that I miss live crowds, live capacity, live shows. I miss it very much. And Ring of Honor used to do 2 shows a year. What do you say, an hour and a half, hour and 45 minutes from us, GP? So, I mean, it was always good to see them, and we always had a good time. I mean, they're awesome shows to go to for being a quote unquote smaller company.
Oh, I've seen them live a couple times. They're really worth going to. I think the last one I was at was Card of Honor at Samstown. It was the one where it had Hangman versus Kota Ibushi. Or no. Hangman versus Hiroshi Tanahashi. That's what it was. That was worth the show. And then like it was in the heat of that Cody Rhodes feud with Kenny and all that. You can't account for idiots, I guess. That's basically what it comes down to.
All right, guys, that's it for the news for the month of May. All right, Jack, you want to go to our next segment here?
That's right, baby. It's time to T.C.B. And I'm not talking about taking care of business. That's right, it's time for title change business. Oh, mama.
That's right, everybody. It's time to T.C.B. It's time to take care of the title change business. So, we're going to quickly go over each branch and each promotion's major title changes. But in order to do that, I need to go a little back last month because it was Impact's Rebellion when we were recording, so I didn't get to mention the title changes that happened there. The first one was the X Division title was won by Josh Alexander, beating Ace Austin in a hell of a match. Then the cataclysmic title change, historical, whatever you want to call it, match between Rich Swann, the TNA and Impact champion, versus Kenny Omega, putting all 3 titles on the line. And Kenny Omega won it. Now he is a 3-time, he has the TNA, Impact, AEW, and AAA championships.
All right, we're going to start off with AEW. All right, first, the TNT Championship. Miro ended Darby Allin's 186-day reign as a TNT champion. And so, yes, Miro, congratulations. He's finally being given a decent run in AEW, so I'm interested in seeing where that goes. The AEW Women's Championship, the title, changed hands last night as Brit Baker, DMD, defeated Hikaru Shida after her irritating 372-day reign. Okay, and then in Impact, The Knockouts tag team titles change hands. Jordan Grace and Rachel Ellering won them and then went right back to Fire and Flava. And then the Impact Tag Team Championships change hands as Violent by Design are your new champions.
Back in New Japan Pro Wrestling, the big shifting actual historical thing, the Switchblade Jay White defeated Hiroshi Tanahashi to become the Never Openweight Championship, making him the first ever Grand Slam champion in New Japan Pro Wrestling, having won the United States, the IWGP Heavyweight, IWGP Intercontinental, and now the Never Openweight Championship. So this is historic considering the guy is still not even in his 30s. It's literally nothing but high skies. And unfortunately, as we mentioned before, the vacated IWGP World Heavyweight Champion Will Ospreay needed to vacate the title due to an emergency neck surgery. So at the time of recording this, we aren't actually sure who the champion is going to be, how they're going to determine that. After that, we go over to NWA. The NWA National Championship was won by Chris Adonis, formerly known as Chris Masters, beating Trevor Murdoch after he won a 182 reign.
Okay, so over at NXT, we have Candice LeRae and Indy Hartwell dethroning Shotzi Blackheart and Ember Moon. Unfortunately, I was very sad. For the NXT Women's Tag Team Championships. Good match. Also, finally, I've been waiting for this for a while. Johnny Gargano lost the title to Bronson Reed. Match was really good also. He's a good wrestler. He's been around for a while. Out of all the title changes match-wise, this was my favorite, though. Over in Ring of Honor television title, Tony Deppen beat Hot Sauce Tracy Williams. And this is actually one of my favorite matches of the entire month. Probably one of my top 5 of the year. I really, really enjoyed that. Now on the WWE main roster, Natalya and Tamina are the new and current, as of this recording, Women's Tag Team Champions. Hopefully see if WWE can actually do something with these belts and make them matter, make us care about them. To this point, I really don't. And the father and son duo of Dominic and Rey Mysterio are now the SmackDown Tag Team Champions. They dethroned Dolph Ziggler and Bobby Roode, who, in my opinion, should have been called Rudolph from the start, which they dropped the ball on and did not call them that. But they, as far as WWE is concerned, and I mean, this could be true. They like to make a lot of crap up, but they're the first father and son tag team champions. They talked about it constantly when it was won. So who knows? It could be true. It could not be true.
Who do you think is going to be the most significant going from this point forward?
Well, I would hope to God it's going to be Brit Baker, DMD, as the AEW Women's Champion, because finally we have somebody that's going to cut promos, somebody that's going to make that title more than, looks like they changed the title so it don't look like a wristwatch anymore. So finally we're going to have somebody that is maybe going to make us give a little bit of a shit about this AEW Women's title, because it sat on somebody who was a great wrestler but never really spoke, never really promoted the title, and she was relegated to curtain jerking matches and AEW dark matches, so they didn't really give Hikaru Shida much of a chance to really elevate that belt. I will say Jay White is going to really make that Never Openweight Championship, as if they keep it on him, it is going to be as, if not more prestigious than the Intercontinental title, if they do it right. So, and then also Tony Deppen. I mean, that he could go down as one of the next great ROH TV champions if they keep it on him, because that guy can go out there and have a match with anybody, big or small, and right now is probably the one to watch in Ring of Honor. So those are my 3 right there as far as the biggest championship wins in the month of May.
Honestly, the one that I was looking forward to was Josh Alexander being the X Division title. I am very high on him. He was good with Ethan Page in the North, solid tag team. Now he's getting his chance to shine and flourish as a singles competitor, which is good. Jay White winning the Never Openweight Championship, like JP said, I think he can elevate that title. He has the voice, the mouth, the promos, the wrestling ability. He can make that title shine and not just have it hot shot back and forth between, two wrestlers like I feel like they've done with that title constantly. It's just the wrestlers might change. Brit Baker, I've been wanting her to win that title for so long. She finally had talented. Her mic work is phenomenal. And when they tried to have her as a babyface, I absolutely was very against it. Not a babyface. It's kind of like her man, Adam Cole. They're both better at being heels because they can just get under your skin. Their promos are good. And she has grown a lot in the past year. So I think this was the perfect time for her to get that title. And the other one's Deppen. I mean, he really impressed me in his match with Tracy Williams. I mean, like I said, I could go on and on about how amazing that match is. If you haven't seen it, check it out. I think it's still on Ring of Honor's YouTube page. Like I said, it's probably one of the top matches of the year so far for me. I mean, it regardless of who else is giving their star ratings out, I think that's if you like a pure wrestling match, that's the one to see. I think he's got big things, and I mean, honestly, Bronson Reed, I feel like he has big things ahead of him too. If they build him the right way, which they can in NXT, if this was a main roster title, I think he'd be screwed in a month. But I just hope he's not just a transitional champion at this point. I think he has big and bright things ahead of him in the company.
It's time for a new segment that we've introduced. We're going to do this every second podcast where we created called 1-2 Watch. How it works is we basically each pick a specific wrestler, could be on the indie circuit, could be a major promotion, and it can't be a champion though. So these are people that we see a lot of potential. We are essentially the gold diggers sifting out the dirt to show off the gold nuggets that are these hidden gems in the wrestling industry. So, I'll go first. Recently, Ring of Honor has reintroduced the women's division by this Women's Division Wednesday. And with that being said, they're going to be having a series of matches leading into the women's tournament. One of these individuals is a girl that I am so nonstop excited to watch, and I really see a huge amount of potential for her. And her name is Roxy. She is only about 19, and she already wrestles better than most women in the industry. I can't really explain how good she is. You just really have to see her. She's already been the first competitor inserted into this Ring of Honor women's tournament, and I really just see this huge amount of potential for this girl. I mean, it's crazy how fluid she is. Her nickname is The Protege, and she rightfully earned that name. I'd highly recommend anyone watching her match, her tag team match. I'm really excited to see what she's going to bring to the women's tournament and to the future of the women's industry.
I'm going to go ahead and go with somebody who has also just serviced in Ring of Honor. That is Chris Dickenson. This guy has gotten around, and his profile is really starting to rise up. He's challenged Tom Lawler on New Japan Strong for the New Japan Strong Championship. He's part of Violence Unlimited and Ring of Honor. He's been in CZW. He's definitely starting to hit all the top indie promotions in the country. This guy is intense. He's a throwback. He's basically pair him to Cesaro, Oney Lorcan. He's in that genre. The guy puts on very intense matches. He can cut a promo. Has had bangers every time I've turned on a match. He's going to be holding a championship very soon. We'll see, what happens over the next few months here with Chris Dickinson.
I don't really know if this person would really be like an up-and-comer. They were a champion in Impact, but they were just an X Division champion. I know me and Jack have at least talked about him, but I still think that he's still relatively unknown because Impact's not a huge company. But a lot of people still don't know him. Chris Bay, for me, I mean, I think this guy is phenomenal. I mean, he was in Super J Cup last year. He's a former X Division champion. He hasn't done much really since he dropped the title, but I see this guy having a huge future ahead of him. He's still young, did phenomenal in the tournament, was a good X Division champion. but I think he's going to be a world champion at some point in time for some promotion, whether it be Impact, whether WWE decides to sign him, who knows. I mean, he has a very, very bright future ahead of him, as far as I'm concerned.
So, today's episode, we are going to be focusing on rivalries, or feuds. What this consists of is basically two wrestlers, or could be a tag team, who on their own are already very talented, but these feuds, these rivalries between these behemoths of wrestling actually created something better, created memories, created this better-than-life feud between these two giants that just made them elevate each other's game to the point where people look back and go, wow, man, that fight between blank and blank were great. So, we're going to start off, as we always do, with the classic era. So, what this will refer to is pretty much anything pre-2002. So, anything from way back in the day to pre-2002.
With mine, I had a few. You guys have obviously been watching wrestling a lot longer than I have, and have a little bit more of a, I guess you would say, a better handle and a better idea of the classic wrestlers, the classic matches, and things like that. But for this one, I mean, from the matches that I've seen between these guys from the mid to late 90s and up into I guess you would say the early part of the Ruthless Aggression era, it kind of sprinkles into you would say it's past our cutoff area. These two really, really brought out the best in each other. They were partners also and had phenomenal matches together. My first one's going to be Rey Mysterio and Eddie. I mean, as far as my research has gotten, their first match together would have been in WCW. It was just a random episode of Nitro back in '97. It was still when Eddie was EDDY Guerrero and Rey was Rey Mysterio Jr. You could kind of tell about how long back that was, as far as my research has got me back. But they were in the Cruiserweight division in WCW. That was honestly one of the best divisions in wrestling history, was the Cruiserweight division, and also one of the divisions that got me into wrestling. Me, myself, I'm a smaller person, being only 5'7", and I knew I wasn't going to be tall from the start. So I really kind of gravitated more towards the Cruiserweight division than, Hulk Hogan and the NWO. And so it's good to see the smaller guys. Regardless of what the match was, they always brought out the best in each other. Their feud with Dominic, his custody was pretty good. But kind of going back towards that era, the throwback era, the match that I think they've really brought out the best in each other, and I mean, that a lot of people can agree with me, would have been their match at Halloween Havoc 97. That was the Mask versus title match. 13 minutes and 51 seconds, but easily the best match on that card. Mid to late 90s WCW, you think of Hollywood Hogan, DDP, Randy Savage, the NWO, but these guys stole the show. And I mean, even after that, they feuded over the Cruiserweight title. They even had a random match in IWA Mid-South in 2002 with CM Punk. It was a triple threat match. They were also teammates for a couple times. I guess you could even say they feuded as well when the Smackdown 6 was happening. I mean, they were friends, they were partners, they were enemies. Their, rivalry and feud spanned from, 97 to, I think their last singles match together was 2005. So, just them competing in matches, as far as my research can find, was almost 8 years. So it was a long culminated feud, but I still think of this as a throwback feud because of when it started and when it was at its peak. They brought out the best in each other. I rewatched the Halloween Havoc match probably every couple months, and I really honestly don't care about any other match from that show. That's the one that I'm just amazed with every time I see it. So that's my first pick. It's one of the best in my opinion, for sure.
This one is probably one of my favorite feuds of all time. This is also from WCW. This one is featuring Chris Jericho versus Dean Malenco over the WCW Cruiserweight title. So this feud was encapsulated for about a 8-month span in 1998. So the seeds for this feud were planted in January 1998, where Jericho defeated Rey Mysterio for the Cruiserweight title at Sold Out, then subsequently defeats Juventud Guerrera at Super Brawl and forces him to unmask. So now Jericho is honing this new heel character. He's cutting a promo on Thunder with the Juventud Guerrera mask on, the Rey Mysterio t-shirt on, and Malenko is the one that is his opponent for that night on Thunder. And so basically Malenko defeats who he thought was Jericho and thinks he just won his Cruiserweight title for the 4th time, only to find out once he takes the masks off him after the match that it was not Jericho, but it was Jericho's associate, Lenny Lane. And so this starts a whole feud here where Jericho finally has to defend the title against Malenko at Uncensored. So Jericho won, and Malenko, after getting berated by Mean Gene Okerlund in like a work shoot type fashion, Malenko goes home frustrated for several months. So now Jericho really is honing that heel character some more, still doing the whole, taking mementos from people that he's beaten, like he took the Sarong from Prince Ikea and so forth. So he's cutting some of the best promos of his entire career. And then one night on Thunder, he defeated Marty Jannetty in a short match, and then he busted out that famous Man of 1004 holds promo. So he was still taking digs every chance he got at Dean Malenko, and eventually Slamboree comes around, and they have Battle Royal set up for the winner to get an immediate shot at Chris Jericho. So the Battle Royal comes down to 2 men. It comes down to Juventud Guerrera, and it comes down to Cyclope. And Cyclope and Guerrera shake hands, and Guerrera just jumps over the top rope. So the person who we thought was Cyclope won. And then, so Cyclope takes on Chris Jericho later on in the show and defeats him. So, we're watching and we're thinking, hey, Cyclope out of nowhere is the new Cruiserweight champion. And then he takes the mask off. And if you go back and watch this is one of the biggest pops you'll ever see from the crowd ever in WCW, was when Dean Malenko won that title. So now Jericho started the whole conspiracy theory thing. And so eventually J.J. Dillon reverses it on the next night on Nitro. So Jericho and Malenko battle it out at Great American Bash, but Jericho wins by DQ after Malenko snaps after Jericho makes a comment about his dead father. And so this leads to a no disqualification match where Jericho continues to insult Malenko, and there's a no physicality rule in the weeks leading up to it. So Jericho is taking shots at his mother and what have you. So now the no DQ match happens. Jericho somehow, some way, gets his way here, and after Malenko snaps, and Malenko is removed from the match entirely, and he's replaced by Rey Mysterio, who defeats Jericho by a roll-up. But now, still doing the conspiracy theory crap, the match is reversed, and the title is given back to Jericho. As Jericho's loophole in this was Dean was being fired for breaking the no physicality rule. Finally culminates after Jericho and Juventud Guerrera are named as the Cruiserweight title match August Road Wild, August 1998. And Dean Malenko is named as the special referee for this match. So with this match, Dean Malenko assists Juventud Guerrera in winning the WCW Cruiserweight title, thus ending the feud. And honestly, this gave a casual fan a real reason who may say that Dean Malenko was boring or whatever, which I never understood. Dean Malenko's always been one of the greatest wrestlers, but this gave some fire to Dean Malenko. This really also established Chris Jericho on the microphone. This established him as a heel character. This really planted the seeds for Y2J. If you go back and look at it, and you look at that armbar promo, and you look at those different nuances that he really cultivated during that 8-month run, So these guys really elevated each other, and also really elevated that cruiserweight title too, because when Juventud Guerrera won it, I mean, those next couple of years, that belt was one of the hottest titles in the company. So yeah, this was definitely an all-time classic feud here. Yeah, this was absolutely fantastic, and one of my favorite classic feuds of all time.
When you think of rivalries, when you think of feuds, when you think of battles that change this industry, when you take two guys who went from working at the bottom to becoming two of the greatest of all time, who really hated each other over time and were complete polar opposites, and they still brought out the best in each other every single time. There's only two names in my mind that come to mind, and that is Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels. And for me, they're one of the reasons I stay a true fan of wrestling, because I was lucky enough to have seen WrestleMania 12. I was there when it happened. Can't describe how much it meant to me seeing that match, but let me go all the way back to their very first time they actually fought. Was way before they were singles fighters, and they were the Rockers and the Hart Foundation. They fought way back in the 80s, and their feud actually kind of started back then because due to shenanigans, they had a match where the Rockers fought the Hart Foundation, where it wasn't televised. It was for the tag team titles. The Hart Foundation were the tag team champions. What had happened was there was a match where the ring ropes, I'm not sure if they secured them improperly or something, but basically the ring ropes broke, but the Rockers won the title. And Vince reversed the decision, so he kept the titles back on the Hart Foundation. And that kind of started the seed of feud between Bret and Shawn, where Shawn was always jealous of Bret, thinking that he was the poster child for Vince. And he wanted to be that guy, and Bret wanting to be just the best he could be. And he saw Shawn as a disrespectful punk, which in a lot of ways, they're both right. But, I mean, they just had this amazing chemistry together. I just can't explain how good they were unless you've seen it. I mean, from their fight in 92 for the Intercontinental Championship ladder match. Like, everyone always talks about the match with Razor Ramon and Shawn, but no one ever talks about Bret and Shawn in the ladder match. And then they fought again for the Intercontinental, and they made that Intercontinental belt better, bigger than the World Championship, because at the time Diesel was the champion and no one cared about Diesel. And then they finally ended up fighting for the title, and then they kept just fighting. They had steel cage matches. And of course ultimately culminating in the Iron Man match. It was the 60-minute Iron Man match, and yet they still kept you entertained. It is so hard to get a wrestling fan to pay attention for 60 minutes straight. But they somehow did it, and they went overtime. Even to this day, you hear little commentary. They use that same little audio snippet of Vince McMahon on commentary going, "The boyhood dream has come true," when Shawn won the title. And of course, it ultimately, just like how it started with giant ball of misunderstanding, it had to end that way because they were too big to not have it ended in a cataclysmic way. But for their feud to end up being the catalyst for arguably one of the most controversial moments in wrestling with the Montreal Screwjob. I mean, their careers are never gonna not be connected to each other, no matter what. They even came out with this DVD set, which I recommend anyone check out. It's really good, where they had Shawn and Bret sit down and they finally talked to each other about everything. And Jim Ross was the mediator, and it's insane. They went through their entire career, all the way up to the modern day, and on the set it has their best matches together. It has their induction ceremony. That moment in 2010 when they were on Raw, and they actually talked to each other. That was legitimately the first time they had talked since 1997. And, you know, Bret, after everything Bret had been through, and after everything Shawn had been through, they finally were squashed their beef. But even if they squashed their beef, like their their feud was real. Like their feud was real. Like it was really the first real wrestling feud, and to this day, it's really one of the only ones I could think of that was legit. Like there was actual heat between them. They actually. That's why it was so entrancing to just be so invested in what was going on and what's going to happen next, and their promos and their fights, and seeing, DX versus the Hart Foundation, and it just got cooler and cooler the more it went on. And me as a kid, watching this, I'm like, man, I was just entranced by everything. And I look back on it, and it's still some of my favorite moments watching those matches.
This next one, we want to talk about classic feuds here. And I'd be absolutely remiss, given that you mentioned Shawn and Bret. I want to go with their equivalent. And I want to go with Sting versus Ric Blair. This feud goes almost about 15 years, off and on. Sting and Ric Flair, Sting used to be a member of the Four Horsemen, and then finally his stock started to rise. And, him and Ric Flair traded the WCW title and the NWA title several times. They wrestled the first match on WCW Monday Nitro as well as the final match on WCW Monday Nitro. Probably these guys were custom built for each other as far as wrestling a great match. I mean, they were just polar opposites, but still, when they get in there, it's magic. I mean, you'd see Ric Flair having the figure four on Sting, and Sting would always reverse it onto Ric Flair. And as a kid, Ric Flair was always the quintessential bad guy for me. You turn on the TV, you wanted to see Ric Flair get his ass kicked, and it almost seemed like almost every time Ric Flair would avoid getting his ultimate comeuppance. But when he did, it was such a big deal. But you just loved watching Sting being the one to do it, because Sting just had a way of they both had the way of bringing out the best in each other. They saved an extra special echelon only for each other. I mean, yes, they had fantastic Absolute Mac Classic with everybody else, but when they wrestled each other, it was a bigger deal. Even on that final Nitro, when they were both a little bit past their prime, they still had something special for each other. When I was a kid sitting in my living room playing with my action figures, it was always Sting versus Ric Flair. I just can't tell you what that rivalry has done for me as a wrestling fan. It really solidified me as a serious wrestling fan, because prior to that, I was all sucked into the cartoon rock and wrestling of the 80s. I was a big Hulk Hogan fan until when I saw Sting and Ric Flair, I realized there was more to wrestling than just Hulk Hogan. And I realized wrestling was a lot better than Hulk Hogan. It was these two that have taught me that. I wish whenever they do a WWE Hall of Fame that they would have a wing for just specific feuds. Because this one, I mean, we can sit there and we can rank a top five. I guarantee all five of us are going to have Sting versus Ric Flair in that top five of all time, just because they just kept going. There was no payoff. It was pretty much Roadrunner and Wile E. Coyote until the end. It didn't end so soon in 2001. I wish Sting could have hit the WWE sooner, and we could have got one more Sting and Ric Flair retirement match. I mean, these two really brought it out of each other in ways others could not. This is one rivalry that I'll always be thankful of, and I'll always love.
So when I was younger, I was more of a WCW guy because they highlighted the Cruiserweight division. I'd say I started getting into wrestling about 97-ish, 98, so I would have been about 4 or 5 at the time. There was one feud in particular that had me switching the channel over and had me more interested in WWF. I know this might sound like a cop-out as an answer to this. It's something that they've tried to do again and again and again, but it'll never be as good as the original. I have to go with Stone Cold and Vince, probably one of the best feuds of all time. And it's a wrestler against technically a non-wrestler. The owner of the company. It started in late December, 97 on Raw. It was like right after one of the In Your House pay-per-views. It was very soon after the Montreal Screwjob happened too. With Bret leaving, they would have to have, tried to build up a new star. They already kind of planted the seeds for that with Stone Cold winning the King of the Ring. Stone Cold was the IC champion at the time, and him and The Rock were in kind of the start of their feud. From what I remember, Austin forfeited the title to The Rock. gave the Rock the stunner, knocked Vince McMahon off the ropes. And this is when Tyson came about, and it was whenever Tyson was on DX's side and the whole WrestleMania 14 build up, and I could go on and on, but this feud lasted, I guess you could really say, for close to 2 years, if not more. I mean, just consistently. And it culminated in different matches. There was a handicap ladder match for control of the WWF, but this was a consistent thing. I mean, they still hinted at it even after the Attitude Era was over, and even after Austin retired from in-ring competition. When during the Ruthless Aggression Era, when he was the Sheriff of Raw, he was still against Vince. He was still going against his wishes. I think it's honestly one of the best storylines and feuds that WWF has ever done. Vince was one of the best, if not the best, heel character of the Attitude Era, in my opinion. I mean, people still boo him. He still gets crap. He doesn't even have to do anything. I mean, he's getting up there in age, but he makes some crazy decisions. But, before that, before Survivor Series, he was just, the owner of the company. And, in the 90s, or the mid to early 90s, he was the part of the announce team. So this was like the perfect time period for that to happen, because this is when wrestling was in an influx. I mean, this was the booming period of wrestling, the late 90s. They've tried it so many times, and they haven't been able to. It kept my interest, in me being, how old I have been, about 5-6 years old. Very difficult to keep my interest at that time. But this, like I said, this pretty much gave me the reason to switch, and it made me tune in every week. And this was when I pretty much started my journey into wrestling too. So this means a lot to me. I mean, this is one of the best feuds ever.
When I think about classic feuds, at first I was thinking, I'll go the obvious route, do an Austin versus Rock, or do a Hogan versus Macho Man, kind of go basic. But then I thought about it, and I think, what rivalry for me, aside from Bret and Shawn, changed the perception of what wrestling could be? I mean, Bret and Shawn was better or worse wrestling at its finest, because you had a high flyer and you had a technical master. But then I thought about who are two of my favorite wrestlers whose careers intertwined together, and the answer became obvious. Undertaker versus Mankind. You really can't have one without the other. Mankind's entire career started as a rivalry to Undertaker. He first debuted on Raw in '96, and then shortly after, Paul Bearer turned on The Undertaker, became the manager of Mankind. It culminated in a fight with them and '96 King of the Ring, where they just beat the hell out of each other, and they just, fought and fought. Just crazy how good they were, like, together. Like, the weird things that Mankind would do was just unlike anyone else. Like, he really did sacrifice his body to just decimate The Undertaker. He dived outside of the ring. He landed him on the concrete. He knew, like, oh, wrestling this guy isn't going to do anything. They had a boiler room brawl, the first ever buried alive match, but then obviously the most famous '98 King of the Ring, the Hell in a Cell. The Hell in a Cell, the one everyone brings up to this day. So many instances in every other way that could have gone wrong. The match should have ended at certain points. I mean, when he threw him off the cell, he told Taker to throw him off the cell. He throws him off the cell, completely dislocated his shoulder, and he gets stretchered out to the ring. Then he crawls right back up the cage, and they just start hitting each other again, and then he breaks him through the cell. If you rewatch that moment where Taker chokeslams him through the cell, no, that was not supposed to happen. That match was the reason I realized how important wrestling was. And it's still, to this day, I think back about it. It was the moment when I realized that I really, in my head, later in life, I think about it. Mick Foley has always been a hero to me, and the reason why, because even though there's strong guys, there's a lot stronger guys, there's a lot better wrestlers, there's a lot more fast guys. The one thing Foley did better than anyone is he never, ever, ever gave up. He always fought. He never gave in. He literally gave everything for this industry. Now that he's retired, I mean, it's affected him in life, but he's still a great person. It's so funny because to this day, you can't talk to Taker about anything without bringing up Mankind. You can't talk to Mick Foley without talking about Undertaker. Their careers are just so perfectly intertwined together, and I really truly think Taker would not be as legendary without Mankind. He really wouldn't. And I also believe that Mick would not be as respected if it wasn't for Taker. They kind of legitimized each other's careers. And even though they're not really, close, I wish they were, just the idea of Taker and Foley just going out now and just having a beer together is just an image that brings a smile to my face. I don't know if they ever do. And it's kind of cool to just know that, what they did is like cemented. And it set a standard that no one has ever been able to do. And to this day, everyone is afraid to ever replicate anything that they did in that match. Just that match alone. And then the funny thing, and this is the part everyone always forgets about that night, King of the Ring 1998, because I watched it live. After that match, Mankind came back later in the show and he attacked Stone Cold. Then he showed up again on Raw the next night. And everyone to that point, that's when that sign came out that says Foley is God. That's where that came from. Because literally, even Triple H even said, how? How are you here? And to this day, I ask myself that every time I watch his stuff. I'm like, how is he still alive? Like I said, they're two of my favorite wrestlers. I know a lot of people don't really see their style as wrestling per se, but as far as entertainment, you can't get better. You really can't with their feuds. Okay, so now that we've gotten some classic feuds out of the way, why don't we go all the way overseas? Now, these feuds are just ones that are kind of shown under the radar of two rivals in the wrestling world, just not taking place in the States. So,
this one, we are going back all the way to 2018 when this started. Now, this feud happened in the country of Ireland for the promotion Over the Top Wrestling, which Troy and I have had many discussions on this promotion. The match quality. This promotion is known for their bangers, and this feud was no different. I am talking about Walter and Jordan Devlin. The first time these two locked horns for Over the Top Wrestling was on June 2nd, 2018 at Haven for Monsters. Walter teamed up with Low Key and defeated David Starr and Jordan Devlin. Jordan Devlin would then get another crack at Walter. This time, Jordan Devlin, as the over-the-top champion, lost his title to Walter at OTT WrestleRama 2 on April 18th of 2018. So they continued, and eventually Jordan Devlin got another crack at Walter at Over-the-Top Scrappermania 5 on March 16th of 2019, where he actually defeated Walter for the title. And these matches were absolute just beatings. You watch these matches and you wonder how the hell did Jordan Devlin survive this. These matches are, in my opinion, what built Jordan Devlin up to the point where he can actually take on bigger competition and look convincing. Walter, of course, is probably... He's a great heel, but when he's in the UK, for whatever reason, he is the ultimate heel. And I think that's because he really, for these other promotions, you don't really see it in NXT UK, but the other promotions really play up that Nazi type thing with Walter, with the video packages and everything. And so, of course, those characters are going to be hated in England, given the events over the history. But these two series of matches, these guys absolutely beat the living out of each other. Jordan Devlin gave it everything he had. Walter gave it everything he had. Jordan Devlin left all three matches with his chest reduced to hamburger meat. You want to talk about guys that actually brought out the best of each other. Definitely this accomplished that, but this brought a whole nother level out of Jordan Devlin, where people actually started taking him seriously. and looking at him in the same vein that they look at Finn Balor. Feud didn't last the longest. It was indeed a blood feud that did get the best out of both of these guys for what they do.
For this one, it got bigger in Japan. Kind of started in CMLL. One of the competitors was under a different name. It's a feud that has been brutal. The matches have been phenomenal. I'm going to go with Time Bomb, Hiromu Takahashi, and Dragon Lee, a.k.a. Ryu Lee. The start of this happened back, say, 2014, 2015. It was when Hiromu was called Kamatashi. He was on excursion at that point and was not the Time Bomb at that point in time. Towards the end of the year in 2015, they had matches for the CMLL lightweight title. A good 2 out of 3 falls match. I've only seen highlights. I haven't really seen the whole match. It's not easy to find. They had matches at Fantastic Mania, which is a co-branded CMLL New Japan show, or was. Then, when Hiromu came back from excursion, now Hiromu Takahashi was in LIJ. They have feuded over the junior title off and on since beginning of 2017. At the time, Hiromu would have been the champion. It was actually at the New Beginning in Osaka in 2017. The 4.5-star match for the title, where Hiromu retained, had countless matches in the Best of Super Juniors. They also had a match which unfortunately put Hiromu on the shelf at G1 in San Francisco back in 2018. There's some real life implications here too. Nobody's seen it. It's a good match, but the ending is the injury's cringy. He kind of lifts them up in a powerbomb position, but puts their head backwards and goes back. And at that point, it crunched Takahashi's neck. And I was actually watching this live when it happened. One of the most gruesome injuries I've seen. And Hiromu had to vacate the title at that point due to the injury that he suffered. Then when Hiromu came back, he actually teamed with Dragon Lee to be in Jushin Thunder Liger's retirement match. It took him about a year and a half before he'd come back, though. Then they finally had their last match up until this point at New Beginning in Osaka in 2020. So about 3 years, almost to the day, that they had their first match for the junior title. That match was... I mean, these are two of the best juniors in the world. I mean, when they get together, they're two of the most phenomenal talents that I've ever seen. They're both still young. Real-life implications that happen. I mean, I know Hiromu probably doesn't harbor any animosity towards Dragon Lee. He was the reason that he had to vacate the title. So they've been in each other's lives for about 6 years, 7 years now. I mean, and that's in two completely different promotions. I mean, they did have a partnership, but it's two different promotions, two different sides of the world, and they still come in contact with each other. The MLL lightweight title to the IWGP Junior Heavyweight title years later, and then having the same match at the same show. I don't know if it's fate or New Japan puts it together that way, but anytime I see a match with them two on the card together, I'm watching it, and you can't say a word to me. I mean, their chemistry is so good, they work so well together. I mean, they've known each other for a while, so they make magic in the ring, and that's, I mean, as far as an overseas feud that isn't one of the top ones that people know about, that's kind of my underrated overseas feud, if you will.
I think this feud might be the longest of all of them. This feud spans 13 years, and it's the beginning and end of a run that, to this day, people wish would go back. This is the feud that essentially fixed New Japan. A little bit of context. Around 2000 to 2002, Antonio Inoki, the owner of New Japan Pro Wrestling, decided people don't want to watch wrestling anymore. Instead, they want to watch UFC. So they had gotten their wrestlers to learn mixed martial arts and had mixed martial artists come in and fight them. And essentially, imagine 2 years of the Brawl for All, and you'll pretty much get a general idea of what happened. And at this time, the person who won and became the champion was a guy who many of you know is probably one of the most controversial, Brock Lesnar. Brock Lesnar decided, I'm going to hold on to the championship and not drop it, not defend the title. He won it, and he decided not to defend it for over a year, nearly 2 years, and New Japan management said, no, we can't have this. We can't have a promotion without a champion. So they decided that they're going to force him to defend the title. He said he will only defend it to a person who has mixed martial arts background. And they just so happened to pick a young lion who made him tap. His first main profile match for the IWGP Heavyweight Championship, and his name was Shinsuke Nakamura. And he went from overnight becoming a young lion to becoming the top champion. And this kind of created a snowball effect of Shinsuke Nakamura reinventing himself and pretty much being a guy who just so happened to be insane. Along the way, there was another man who was essentially, think of the Sting or the Stone Cold of the company, slowly building a fan following of everyone just saying, everyone else is a mixed martial artist, everyone is this, is this. This is a wrestler. This is us. This is our guy. This is wrestling. That man was Hiroshi Tanahashi, also known as the Ace. And for 13 years, they started off as just two guys who fought to becoming the two most recognized champions in New Japan history, with the exception of Okada. But to see the culmination of their careers just intertwine, I mean, they fought each other just regularly. Then they fought each other for the heavyweight championship. Then Shinsuke created this King of Strong style persona. Then Hiroshi became known as the Ace of New Japan. Just seeing them clash against each other again. And Shinsuke and him going from the heavyweight title to the Intercontinental title to back to forth. And they each elevated those belts and elevated those championships and those accolades to a level they had never been at before. Like, they actually made people watch wrestling from overseas. And no one had really paid much attention to New Japan up until that point, in the modern era anyway. And it really is astounding to see just how good they were. Just like, it would be the closest equivalent I could say would be the equivalent of if you took Eddie Guerrero at his prime and you took Finn Balor, but you gave him the weight and strength of Karrion Kross. That's essentially what their feud was. I really can't do justice to how good it was. I mean, think about this for a moment. They main evented Wrestle Kingdom 1. The very first Wrestle Kingdom. They main evented it. 10 years later, at Wrestle Kingdom 10, they main evented again. That is how good they were. Their just rivalry is still talked about to this day. The belt that was the Intercontinental belt, that was the belt that Shinsuke designed. The heavyweight championship, before it got converted into one belt, that was the one that Ace created. So there really are part of New Japan history and a part of wrestling history. And it's kind of a shame to see what has happened, especially to Shinsuke in the States, because it's the equivalent of seeing it's like, or seeing like a Maserati driving 5 miles in a school zone. You're like, oh. You can feel the pain of the driver wanting to accelerate. It's like that. But ultimately, their careers are always going to be intertwined with this long, long rivalry. In fact, it's funny because Shinsuke's first match, he became the heavyweight champion, and his last match in New Japan was against Hiroshi Tanahashi. So it kind of came full circle. And I still wish Shinsuke would go back to the New Japan pro wrestling scene, but at the same time, I'm also like, nothing he can do will change the legacy he left behind, especially in the feud between him and Tanahashi.
If we're going to talk about international wrestling, you know this name is always going to come up with me. And you guys know it, the Ultimo Dragon. Well, his series of matches with Jushin Liger from 1995 through 97, it was more of a rivalry. I wouldn't say a full-blown feud, but these guys had more than enough matches with each other where there was a constant one-upsmanship between the two of them. What really turned me on to international wrestling, and that's where I really began to get to know the Ultimo Dragon, and as well as Jushin Thunder Liger. You know, Jushin Liger, I mean, you got to see much more than what WCW allowed you to see, because when they put them on Nitro, usually the job to somebody. Two of the most decorated international stars of all time. They dominated the Super J Cup. Ultimo Dragon, of course, with the J Crown and everything too. I'm going to keep this one short here. These two really, we've seen their stuff. All of us. There's nothing I need to explain to you two. You guys know what I'm talking about. These guys have absolutely tore it down every time they were in the ring together. I wish I could just dial it back and go back in time and sit there and watch one of these suckers live.
Okay. So, my next one, I guess it would kind of be, excuse me. My next one, I guess it would kind of be more in the rivalry aspect, as opposed to the feud aspect, just like my last one. But these two have also had their histories intertwined. This one's been going on probably about 5-6 years now, if I was looking correctly. Excuse me. And this one started in progress, as far as I can tell, and where my research leads me to. We did discuss one of them earlier today with Unfortunate News, that being Will Ospreay and Zack Sabre Jr., where my research leads me to is Progress, Chapter 19 of the Strong Style Tournament, Day 2. So this is back May 25th, 2015 was the date of that. And they had this tournament, and I don't really know the specifics of it. I'm not a big Progress guy, unfortunately. I've seen some shows, and there's certain matches that I've seen too. But these two their careers have been very similar, and not similar, I wouldn't say. They've kind of gone down a similar path, I guess you would say. They've been in Progress together, Red Pro, WXW, PWG, and now they're both in New Japan. And unfortunately, both Sabre's in a pretty dominant heel faction, and Will Ospreay is the leader of prior to him getting injured, dominant heel faction. And anytime these guys, it's just like the Dragon Lee and Hiromu Takahashi rivalry. Anytime these guys get together, you can tell they have respect for each other. I watched documentaries on Ospreay, and from what I've seen, Sabre's almost always there. They've been on the same shows, same promotions, same companies together. Both from the UK. Both smaller guys. Probably didn't get a lot of recognition, and people weren't looking at them. Sabre was in the Cruiserweight Classic when they had that. Unfortunately, he didn't win because he didn't want to sign with WWE, so he didn't want to give their championship to someone who didn't want to sign with them, which is understandable. But as far as other real exposure that Sabre's gotten in the States, it's kind of minimal. He seems to be happy with New Japan, as is Ospreay at this point in time, from what we're led to believe. And anytime I see them in G1, they have a match coming up, or I don't know if they've actually had a match in the G1. New Japan Cup. Anytime that they're on a card or a show, and there's a possibility of them having a match together, that's one of the ones that I have to see. They did actually have a match in the G1 together. Back in 2019, they had a match together. PWG, they've had matches together. Anything I've seen from these guys together, their chemistry is fantastic. And that's probably from knowing each other for years and years and coming up with each other on the same independent scene. They're very close in age, so they probably learn from similar guys and learn from different teachers and things like that. But their trajectory's gone I mean, pretty close to each other. With Rev Pro, I think Sabre was can't remember what their main title is called. I think if I'm not mistaken, it's the British Commonwealth Championship, the British Heavyweight title. They both carried that belt on different occasions, and unfortunately, Sabre's success does not translate over to New Japan very well in singles action anyway. But I think it's possible that if had Ospreay not gotten hurt, that could have been a possible feud for the IWGP Heavyweight title if they would have used it correctly. But yeah, I mean, anytime these guys are together, it's so fluid, and I'm just amazed. I mean, just like I said with Hiromu and Dragon Lee, like I said, not so much a feud, but more of a rivalry. Since they've been around each other, so they have fantastic matches. They're definitely two of my favorites too.
I'm going to do something a little different. So this is actually a feud that's fairly old, but it's one that a lot of people need to pay more attention to, because certain wrestlers have pointed back to this feud and these two individuals, and this is kind of something that a lot of people really, really sleep on. I'm going to talk about some women's wrestling. Specifically, the feud between Akira Hakito and the Flying Angel Minami Toyota. Now, as a lot of people know, Minami Toyota is nicknamed her. A lot of people refer to her as the greatest wrestler of all time. I'm sorry. A lot of people refer to her as the greatest women's wrestler of all time. And she's pretty much earned that title. I mean, she's won every major title for every women's promotion she's wrestled. And, like I said, her matches are accolades. She is the first woman to ever get a 5-star match. And it was actually from her and Akira Hakito. So, their feud was so dynamic because Minami Toyota is a very high-powered, quick-paced, but athletically gifted woman. And Akira Hakito, her style was more, shall we say, in the realm of the Great Muta. A little more theatrical, but more hardcore. She could wrestle in the same way that you could see a Zack Sabre Jr., but just in the same way, she could wrestle with someone like Bull Nakano in hardcore steel cage matches. The match between her and Bull Nakano, on a side note, Akira Hakuto and Bull Nakano, it literally made me cringe when I first saw their match, their hardcore match, because it was so bloody. It was insane. But back to the feud itself. Minami Toyota is legitimately, I agree, she is the greatest women's wrestler of all time. In fact, Kenny Omega has actually said on record he crafted the One-Winged Angel based off of her finisher, hold on, I just forgot what it was called. Give me 2 seconds. Sorry, give me 2 seconds. Oh, fuck, what is it called? Jeez, I just had it 2 seconds ago. I'm so sorry. I hate being this unprofessional. Okay, here we go. He based the One-Winged Angel off of the Japanese Ocean Bomb, which is a straight jacket on your shoulders, straight jacket power bomb. So, reverse power bomb. So she basically does a power bomb in reverse. Think of it like a electric chair, but she's wrapping your arms at the same time as she's doing it. And it really is that devastating of a move, and it's hard to pull off. She does that, the Japanese Ocean Cyclone Suplex. She and and Hakito really made All Japan Women's Wrestling. If you've never seen All Japan Women's Wrestling, I recommend checking it out. Like, these girls were wrestling better than most men, especially in the 90s. Like, holy crap. Like, even wrestlers now look back at them and go, shit, if we did what they were doing, man, we would have made millions. But because they were women, and because it was Japan, which Japanese women's wrestling was kind of a niche market, no one paid attention and no one cared. But I wanted to put a spotlight on this feud specifically because I highly recommend anyone who's a wrestling fan to watch them. It really is astounding how good they really were together. And the feud, I believe, started from 1990 all the way to, I want to say, 1994. So pretty decent. It was on and off again around that time. Obviously, the Flying Angel, Minami Toyota, is the baby face because she's so, bubblegummy. But what she got in that ring, man, she could go. And then Akira has always been a villain. That's her whole thing, is she's been this weird ghost geisha thing. And it was just such a cool dynamic to see these two girls who just tore the house down as far as wrestling is, especially in the 90s. Alright, so now we will go into the modern era of wrestling. And I think I'll give it to Troy this time. Troy, take it away.
This is one of the feuds, rivalries, whatever you want to call it, mid-2000s, which I still consider being in the modern era. And this is also one of my favorite promotions, too. It happened in Ring of Honor, thinking of how amazing this feud was and how awesome the matches were. They feuded over the Ring of Honor title, the Pure title, Bryan Danielson, a.k.a. Daniel Bryan, and Nigel McGuinness in Ring of Honor. Unfortunately, it's not something that we can see in the future at this point in time. Their feud started in 2006. They actually had a match. It was actually Weekend of Champions, night 2. One was Ring of Honor World Champion. The other was the Pure Champion at the time. The Pure Championship's first incarnation. It has been brought back recently. That match was won via countout, so there was no titles changing hands at that night. A couple months later, at Generation Now, Bryan Danielson defended the world title against McGuinness. Literally one of my favorite matches, most intense matches I have ever seen in my entire life. Ring of Honor Unified. It was in the UK. It was a unification match for the Pure title and the world title. Also, at this point in time, Bryan Danielson was the guy in Ring of Honor. Nigel was up there too, but they were in the UK, and Danielson could have literally brought kittens out and handed them to everybody in the ring, and they still would have hated them. The UK crowds are hot, and this is one of the first matches that showed me how hot the UK crowds were. They were behind Nigel like he was the second coming of Jesus. I mean, he could have done no wrong. The spot that I'm speaking of, though, ring post spot, where Danielson pulls Nigel up against the ring post, and you could tell Nigel just took the full brunt of the ring post on his forehead, and I was in awe. I mean, the first time I saw it, my jaw was almost on the floor. There was no faking that. You heard the ting of the ring post off his face. He just starts pouring blood. But that, I looked at that and I was like, oh, I'm going to start watching more Nigel McGuinness matches just because of that one. I've always been a fan of, as long as I can remember, of Bryan Danielson, a.k.a. Daniel Bryan, but whenever I found this match, I wasn't too big on Nigel. That made me in awe of him. They've had matches 2-3 years. Their final match was Glory by Honor back in 2009, and I mean, their feud continued from there. And you could tell there was, genuine respect between the two, but they made everybody assume and show that they hated each other. They actually main evented that show. Nigel went to Impact Wrestling shortly after that. Daniel Bryan, a.k.a. Bryan Danielson, was very close to going to WWE at that point in time also. they both had tryouts for WWE, and they ended up not taking Nigel for different reasons, and they picked Bryan Danielson instead. I would have loved to have seen another match from them recently, but unfortunately Nigel has some health issues. We don't know what's happening with Daniel Bryan right now as of this recording, but they're in the same company now. I mean, they probably still talk to each other and they're still friends, and I've seen various interviews where they speak so highly of each other. But if you haven't checked their match at the unification match for the pure title and the world title, please. It's one of the best matches I've ever seen, honestly.
Yeah, this next one for the modern era, I'm going to go with just because of the significance of it. I mean, in 2011, there was nobody hotter than CM Punk. And the whole pipe bomb promo was probably one of the last instances of where everybody was like, is it a work? Is it shoot? And, but the feud with him and John Cena. John Cena was basically, he represented the holding down of the young talented. He basically represented what was in all of our heads about the WWE, and Punk represented those of us that were labeled the IWC, that loved the Daniel Bryans and the CM Punks and what have you. So for a few months, it's like both sides were really at war, and so basically the whole thing with Punk leaving the quote unquote leaving the company and then saying that he was going to win the WWE title and then take the title with him. I mean, this was an absolutely fantastic little feud here. And they didn't really wrestle each other too much, but what a match it was at Money in the Bank. We all remember that. We all remember the feeling that we had going in our head for this. And and with Punk eventually, winning this, and then later on that night, we see a picture on Twitter of the WWE title in a refrigerator with a Pepsi in front of it. That was probably one of the more iconic, one of the more funniest pictures I've ever seen. But no, I mean, that was a great series of matches. These guys couldn't be any more different from each other. And I mean, I know Cena takes a lot of heat, but I mean, looking back at his body of work, you have to appreciate him somewhat, because he really did a great job hanging in there with Punk, and they put on an absolute classic that they did. I mean, it was wrestling poetry. That was a great modern feud right there. So
this is the feud between the two best wrestlers from Stardom, Io Shirai versus Mayu Iwatani. This feud started back in 2015 and it lasted all the way to 2018. And what's so weird with their feud was it wasn't a matter of, ego. It was always a matter of mutual respect. They didn't have any animosity towards each other. Io had more experience, but Mayu was a quick learner, so it was a very, very similar back and forth. In fact, there's actually a website that broke down their feud, saying statistically it's one of the best feuds in wrestling because they're so similar. Their striking, their grapples, their moves, their just everything. Everything they had against each other was just the perfect balance of fighting, just back and forth. Their feud eventually just when Io would win, then Mayu would win, and back and forth. And it was ultimately Mayu eventually lost. Io ended up winning the whole feud, but it was never a matter of them disrespecting each other. They brought out the best of each other. They were able to just elevate each other to a way that really almost no one has ever been able to get to since. Io Shirai is still known as the Genius of the Sky. That was her nickname then, and it's her nickname now. And Mayu is known as the Ace of Stardom, which is what she is. She's still the veteran presence, the person who stayed in the company as long as she has and just keeps elevating more and more people and keeps putting on hell of a matches. And keeps putting on these great matches with these, up-and-comers to these, veterans. And it's always been a great show for me, both of them, but to see both of them clash each other was just such a great concept to see a rivalry based off of mutual respect and no ill will is really, really rare in this industry. And I think that theirs is a perfect culmination of just mutual respect, getting mutual respect, and still.
This kind of is stretching the whole modern thing because, it goes back to 2003, or even back to, it started in 2000, but with the styles and everything, it translates to, it can be considered modern now because these guys were ahead of their game then. But I have to go with Kurt Angle versus Chris Benoit. For the early to mid 2000s, these guys just put on clinics with everybody that they were in the ring with. But when they did it with each other, it was an absolute work of art. That match that they had at WrestleMania 2001, which would be WrestleMania X7, was just an absolute classic. Probably one of my favorite matches of all time. In the sense that you just talk. They were both so well matched that it was you almost had a problem with either one of them losing, and so we know that Angle won that match, and then they had an ultimate submission match at the following Backlash with Benoit won. And these guys, God, it just, I know that, it's a lot of people might have a problem with me even mentioning Benoit at all, but I have to, we're talking about best feuds, best matches, best everything. We have to at least include Chris Benoit in this, and this is where I'm at with this because this is one of my favorite feuds of all time, and of this modern era from the 2000s on, and these guys pretty much set the whole table for the CM Punks, the Will Ospreays, everybody that we've mentioned before here. These guys were the definite table setters, and I guarantee the match that these guys watch all the time is that either that ultimate submission match or that match at WrestleMania X7, where these two just completely tore down the whole arena. But absolute banger of a feud, and I wish that Chris Benoit never did that and was still here with us.
It's a feud that I've been following for as long as I can remember. It's actually been going on for about 15 plus years, I guess you would say. Mine's going to be Kevin Steen, currently known as Kevin Owens, and El Generico, currently known as Sami Zayn. For a lot of the more casual fans who aren't too much into the indies, you've seen some of this, where in NXT back in 2015, when KO made his debut after Sami won NXT title for the first time, KO acted like he was his friend, and that's what we were led to believe, that they were BFFs. KO proceeded to savagely beat down Sammy, and they had a match at the next takeover, or the next two takeovers actually, for the NXT title. KO won title and then retained it at the next one. Since then, they have been going back and forth. They've had multiple pay-per-view matches, feuded over different titles. US title, IC title, if I'm not mistaken. They've been friends, they've been enemies. Even before that, back in Ring of Honor, they were tag team champions at one point in time. They had very good runs with the belts too. They've also been PWG tag team champions. But back in Ring of Honor as well, they had a storyline where, as usual, Steen at the time turned on El Generico, and they had one of the greatest ladder matches that I can remember seeing. 28 minutes, and they beat the ever-living crap out of each other. If you haven't seen that, definitely go watch it. If you haven't seen any of their tag team matches, go watch them. Careers have intertwined with each other. One of the best feuds I've ever seen. With them knowing each other so well, they can develop that kind of, I guess, kayfabe hatred to put on a show for the fans, and they do it every single time. Fight Forever is an understatement with this feud going on, this feud and rivalry going on for, 15, 16 years. Just had a match with each other at WrestleMania again this year. That just shows you how long they've been with each other and had matches with each other. And they team, they feud, they team, they feud. It's up and down, all over the place. But
all right, so kind of branching away from women's wrestling, let me talk about the rivalry that is probably, out of all of them, the most modern. Because this feud is still technically kind of going on between the Golden Star, Kota Ibushi, and the Switchblade, Jay White. I am a huge Jay White fan, as everyone knows, and Kota Ibushi, I'm not super big on, mostly because I feel that if it wasn't for Kenny, he wouldn't really have a career. But at the same time, every time they've ever fought each other, they have just blown everyone away. They just put on a clinic every single time. There's legit animosity between them. Kota is clearly the one who the company wants to back all the time because he's their handpicked guy. And Jay White isn't their pick, but he's hit every single check mark of greatness. So it's very much... Shit, sorry about that, my phone went off. It's very much in the same sense of, between, how Rollins was in WWE, how he was the handpicked guy so no one liked him. And that kind of thing is what I get off from Kota. I know that's not intentional, but that's what he comes off as. And, for the fact that he fought... Sorry, fucking phone keeps going on. Sorry, I forgot what I was saying. Shit. So Kota is a very, very insanely talented wrestler. I will never take that away from him. I think he's beyond talented. I think that he has this ability to do things that most wrestlers can't do. I think he's an extremely talented individual. I just can't stand the guy personally. Whereas Jay White is extremely talented, and I like him because I think his character is unique, dynamic, not only because he's the leader of the Bullet Club, but he's earned that title. And in fact, I really do believe he is the best leader the Bullet Club has ever had, because he's already made history. He was the youngest U.S. champion, he was the youngest heavyweight, intercontinental, and never openweight. And he's the first to get all four. So he's already made history And even though their age difference is really significant, they both wrestle as if they are just in the same league as each other. Kota has beaten Kota has beaten Jay, Jay's beaten Kota. They've just had this cosmic dance of fighting each other over and over again that is just really insane to watch. I mean, their match at Wrestle Kingdom, they tore the house down. It got more viewerships in New Japan than any other match, even the Okada Kenny match. And that's quite a lot. That's saying quite a lot. With that, I think we're going to end it for the night. But before we go, all three of us will just, lightning round a couple of rivalries that we can just recommend to you for you guys to research behind the scenes. So this will be, classic, modern, overseas, whatever. We'll just give you some names so that way you can check them out yourself whenever you get some free time. So I'll go first. Okada versus Tanahashi.
Raven versus Tommy Dreamer.
Taz versus Bam Bam was pretty good, or Taz versus Shane Douglas.
Bruiser Brody versus Abdullah the Butcher.
Ultimo Dragon versus Yuji Nagata.
Red Dragon, which is Kyle O'Reilly and Bobby Fish against the Young Bucks in New Japan.
Sasha Banks versus Bayley.
Rob Van Dam versus Jerry Lynn.
Jericho versus Shawn Michaels.
And I think my last one, because I'd be remiss if we didn't mention it, Austin versus Rock.
Triple H versus The Undertaker.
Randy Orton versus Cena. I mean, it was shoved down our throat, but it was a long time, and it was actually a pretty decent rivalry and feud.
And just to add a little flair, just because it's kind of rare, let's throw in the Hardys, Edge and Christian, and the Dudleys in there too. Just add some variety. From everyone here at the Lioncast Wrestling Crew, I'm Jack.
I'm JP, wishing you all a good night. Enjoy the show that we just put on here. And if you hit us up on the Lioncast Wrestling Crew Facebook page. And as always, let us know what you want us to talk about.
Troy also signing off, and if you enjoyed it, we hope you did. And like I said, like JP said, tell us what you want us to talk about, and we'll get some new topics on.
And make sure to elbow drop that like button and leave a comment down below for the 1, 2, 3. And as always, we'll see you next time.